We're gonna do a database tutorial today.
This video is proudly sponsored by Oxide Hosting. With this hosting company, you can never go wrong. They provide outstanding customer support and all for a low price. Their services range from website hosting to Minecraft server hosting. If you are interested in them, be sure to check out the link in the description below.
Hey, it's me, Dunsel3, and welcome back to another MenuDocs tutorial. Today we are going to add a database to the bot to make sure that our prefixes are persistent. To connect to the database, we are going to use a software package called HakiriCP. Yes, I am well aware that it is pronounced HikariCP and not Hakiri. HakiriCP is a database pool, which means stuff should be faster. I myself have never used this library before, so it's gonna be new to both of us. So to get started, we want to open up our build.gradle, and I'm just gonna copy this from off screen. We're just gonna install it. If you use Maven, you need to use this, but I assume that you know how your favorite build tool works. We also need an implementation for HakiriCP to work with. For now, I'm just going to stick with SQLite, and the reason that I am creating SQLite right now, because in the future we will abstract the database, meaning that you can use MongoDB, MariaDB, what else is there? Just create your own class for it and it will work. But for now, let's install the dependencies and start working on our database stuff. First of all, we need to create a data source. This data source is going to be in a custom package, which is the database subpackage. And in our database subpackage, I'm going to create a class SQLite data source. What I'm also going to do is add a logger. And with this logger, we can print in those fancy colors to the console. Next up, we will need our Hakiri config. So, private static final Hakiri config equals new Hakiri config. Turns out I can't spell. It's Hikari. Anyway, next up we're going to make a static block, and in the static block we're gonna initialize the stuff. So first off, within a try catch, and it's just gonna catch an IO exception. And when this IO exception happens, we're just going to e.print stack trace. First of all, we want to say where our database file is, because SQLite is file based. And we're just gonna say it will be next to the jar in database.db. Of course, we want to make sure that our bot will be able to boot if the database is not there. So what it's gonna do is if db file.exists, and we're gonna negate this. So if it does not exist, then we're gonna do another check. So db file dot create new file. This will return a boolean. So if we created a file, we're gonna say logger.info created database file. But if that failed somehow, we're gonna say could not create database file. Next up, we are going to set some stuff on the config. The first thing is a JDBC URL. And for every database, this is different. I just happen to know that for SQLite, it is JDBC :SQLite file path. And because our file is next to the jar, we're just going to say database.db. We're going to set a test connection query. And the only thing that this will do is we'll just execute select one. And if that fails, the database does not work. And these last three are just some settings that I found when Googling HikariCP SQLite. Next up, we're going to create our data source at the top over here. And then we're going to assign it before we start doing any database stuff in here, like initializing our tables, we need to add two things, which is a constructor. So alt insert, and this constructor needs to be private, because we don't want anyone to instantiate a new instance of this class. And we need to create a get connection method. And connection, we need to import that from java.sql. So now that we have this get connection method, we can say try, and we're gonna make this a try with resources. Get connection dot create statement, and we're gonna call this a statement. We need to catch an SQL exception, and just as anyways, e.print stack trace. Just handle this however you want to handle it. And because this automatically closes our statement, we don't need to do anything like final close it. Next up, we're gonna say statement.execute, and I'm just gonna put a comment above here, so IntelliJ knows we're writing SQLite here. So to create a table, we're gonna say create table if not exists. I'm gonna call this gold_settings, just so we can like expand upon this later on. In this table, we're gonna have an ID, which is an integer primary key and auto increment. We're gonna say gold_ID, which is a varchar of 20, because they're not really longer, and this should be not null. And finally, we're gonna add the prefix, which is prefix varchar 255 not null. I said not null default, and our prefix is exclamation mark, and we're gonna close this. And let's just add a nice comment table initialized. As you can see right here, this is our default prefix, but you may have different prefixes between the development version of your bot and the public version of your bot. So what we can do with that, we can just take our prefix from the config. I said take our prefix from the config, and instead of exclamation mark, we're just gonna concatenate on, that's not right. We're just gonna concatenate on the default prefix. Just make sure that with your default prefix you don't accidentally do SQL injection. In our main bot class right now, we can add this at the top, and we're just gonna add it to the throws section. And the reason that we do this is so that the class gets accessed, because until this class gets loaded in, none of this code will execute. So we just run a get connection here, and because we will access the class, the database file should get created, the table should get initialized, and hopefully no error should be thrown. So let's run and keep an eye on the console. And as you can see, I am a master at copying my own code from off screen. We see that the database file was created. If IntelliJ wants to synchronize. There you go, here's our database file. And as you can see, I added this in my git ignore because you don't want to commit your database to GitHub. But if we open this database in IntelliJ, you can see our gold settings table. As you can see, there's nothing in this right now. But what we can do is open the console and type select 1. I just want to show you guys what this does. So if we run this, it will just return 1. If you don't have any drivers for this database in your IDE, what you want to do is you want to open the properties window, and there will be like a download driver button right here. But because I have the driver installed, it says Yeah, it works. And as you can see, this is another way of writing the JDBC URL. So now that we know our bot is working, we can shut it down. Actually, that's not our prefix. So now that our data source is ready, we can go over to our listener and create a method to obtain the prefix. So private string get prefix, and in here do a long guild ID. And what we need to do in here is create another try with resources. We're also gonna catch the SQL exception. And in our try statement, we want to say SQLite data source dot get connection dot prepare statement. Of course, I'm just going to insert my SQLite language. And because our database is loaded into IntelliJ, we can actually autocomplete based on our database. So for example, we can say select prefix from guild settings. And as you can see right now, we can even click on this to go to the prefix column, which is pretty nice in my opinion. Anyway, this is not what we want, because this right here will return every single prefix in the database, and our database can get quite big. So we need to limit this where a guild ID equals question mark. And we do this to prevent SQL injection. Even though it's very unlikely that SQL injection will happen in this case, it's always better to be safe than sorry. So prepared statement dot set string, and we're gonna say string dot a value of a guild ID. Next up, we're gonna make another try with resources, but we don't need a catch block because we're already catching the SQL exception down here. So we're gonna say prepared statement dot execute query. This is our result set, and we're gonna say if result set dot next, we're gonna return result set dot get string prefix. But if somehow we don't have a next, and which will happen, for example, when the guild is not in the database, we're gonna say another try with resources. It's gonna be very nested here. SQLite data source dot get connection dot prepare statement. And we're gonna say insert statement. Again, gonna bring this down and add my language comment because I really like that. And in this statement, we're gonna say insert into guild settings. The values that we want to insert is only the guild ID, because our prefix has a default value and the values is a question mark. So now we can say insert statement dot set string dot value of guild ID, and then we're gonna say insert statement dot execute. And because we're still not returning a prefix right here, it means that our default prefix got inserted in the database, and we can just return config.get prefix. Wow, that was a long method. Now to use this method, we could either do get prefix with the ID. As you can see, IntelliJ is already giving us a hint that it can be replaced with a method reference. And the method reference is literally this get prefix, or for static methods, class.get prefix. As you can see, this looks way cleaner, and it will just work right now. But if you open our guild settings table, you can see that our guild is not in the database. So right now we're gonna run the bot and we're gonna say exclamation mark ping. Well, that just works. But if we refresh it, you can see that our guild is now in the database with the prefix. And because our prefix is now in the database, we can change it and update. Well, that won't work currently because our prefix is already in the map. And because we're not looking up the prefix every single command, it will be so much faster. But of course, the set prefix command it only updates like the internal map, because even though we should get 2 question marks, we only get 1 because that's what we inserted ourselves. So let's set this back to double exclamation mark, and let's start working on the set prefix command, which we'll do next. And when the set prefix command is done, we will be done as well. So in our set prefix command, we can do private void update prefix. We're gonna say long guild ID and string new prefix. The first thing that we can already do is copy our very bad design map and put that in there. So we can call over here update prefix, guild ID and new prefix. So now we don't need to change the handle method anymore. Next up, we're going to create another prepared statement. So try, and of course, catch SQL exception. Let's import this. So of course, like we usually, SQLite data source .get connection.prepare statement. Oh, that's not what I meant to do. I'm going to do it on that one. Prepare statement. Let's again indent this and add our language comment, which is language equals SQLite. And because we know our guild is always in the database at this point, because it had to go through the listener, we can just say update guild settings set prefix equals to a question mark. And because we are literally accepting anything from the user, it's very important to guard against SQL injection, or our users will be able to run something like exclamation mark set prefix question mark. Then we're gonna use a comment semicolon drop all the tables. That's how you spell tables, and let's turn the rest into a comment that the database ignores. If we don't guard against something like this, it means that our user can basically run SQL commands, which is very dangerous. But we need to do a little bit more here, because this will update all the rows. So we just need to say where guild ID, as you can see, it auto-completes for us, equals question mark. And so prepare statement dot set string 1 new prefix. And yes, just like at our listener over here, it's a 1. And here's well a 1. Because SQL counts as 1. Because conventions. And for our second index, we're gonna say string dot value of guild ID. And finally, you can say prepare statement dot execute update. Now that our set prefix command is done, we can just rerun the bot, and let's open our database. We can say set prefix double question mark. We can now see it has been set to a double question mark. So if we refresh the database, you can see that it has been updated in the database. But now let's try some SQL injection. What? Our prefixes have been set to this. Let's check out the database. Boom! As you can see, all spaces have been removed luckily, but also no SQL injection has been taken place because we guarded against it. So set prefix back to the double exclamation mark. Oh cool, it actually worked. And there we go. But we can also alter this ourselves and just reboot the bot to show you that it actually loaded from the database. So now we can say ping. And as you can see, the prefix was successfully loaded from the database and used in the bot. Wow, 30 minutes of footage. RIP. So that's how to integrate a database in your bot. And I know not all of you will like SQLite, so that's why I'm going to teach you next time how to create an abstraction layer for your database so you can switch out your database more easily. Goodbye.